my goal is just, can I look like Joe Aesthetics with like 30% of the work by using chemistry?
That's always your goal, loopholes. Hey, but Tony, when you were mentioning SARMs earlier, I'm someone who's never used any SARM except Ostrine, but I've used most steroids. Can you explain to me how some of them compare, for example, to Anavar, in the sense that, for example, I know an S23, I wanted to also ask, is it something to do with progesterone probably that's causing it to be so halting to the system?
I don't know if there's any interaction with the progesterone receptor. As far as relating to Anavar, I think all SARMs are very similar to Anavar, actually. I think that's the closest steroid to Anavar and Primobolan. I think SARMs are very similar to.
So why would anybody use a SARM over Anavar? That's what I'm curious about. That's what I always tell people. People ask me about SARMs. I say, well, look at this. Before, historically, I didn't know what causes liver cancers for steroid users. So when I was using steroids, I tried not to use orals. And when I did, I only used orals that were very useful, like Anadrol or something like that. I used to think that Anavar could cause liver cancer. I had no idea. Later on, I did a really intensive study, a survey of all the academic papers on the subject. I read everything. And I can't find, I believe I never found one paper showing Anavar causing liver cancer. But there are tons showing, well, there's a couple of case reports showing Trenbolone does. We have 2 subscribers to this channel who got liver cancer, one from Trenbolone. And Anadrol certainly is very associated with it. But Anavar isn't. So I realized actually that it's the residence time and the androgenicness that caused the liver cancer. And Anavar is actually quite innocuous.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why people would use SARMs over Anavar is because they think that Anavar is liver toxic, and we know that SARMs are virtually not liver toxic. But you're right. I also haven't seen a lot of evidence of real-world liver toxicity from Anavar either. So why would someone use SARMs over Anavar? One is Anavar seems to plateau in its effectiveness. So, you take 50 milligrams versus 100 milligrams. I don't think, Boston, what do you think? I don't think you're going to notice that much of it. I think you sort of like 50 milligrams is like a sweet spot, and then you go 100, 150, not much happens, right?
I've never attempted 100 mgs of Anavar.
What?
I've never even attempted to even try 100 mgs of Anavar. I thought it was pointless.
Oh, really?
I think people that do say that there's not really much benefit over 50. For example. So you've got a plateau with Anavar that you don't have with some of the SARMs. Like you can take an LGD 4033 and you go up in dosage and the effects just keep coming. And then it comes to a point where can you eat enough and you're training hard enough and all that, but you can you can go with a higher dosage of a SARM and get more benefit than a higher dosage of an Anavar. But if you're just taking a low dosage, here's with females, for example. Females are still more likely to have side effects from Anavar than they are from SARMs, even though side effects for Anavar are pretty low for them.
Really?
So like for a female, I still give my girlfriend SARMs over Anavar.
My female clients are majority SARMs.
So what SARMs would you, say you were a guy, not a woman, and you wanted to use something in addition to Anavar, but something like that, that's light, that's not so harmful for your health. I know Ostrine is weaker than Anavar, right? So you wouldn't add that onto it. What would your first choice? Is it LGD that you would choose? Either of you?
LGD 4033 for size or LGD 3303 for size. RAD 140 for stamina, muscle hardness, definition, sort of the reasons why most people use Anavar in the first place. What else am I using? I mean, S23 is also much more powerful.
I would say Ostrine and Anavar are comparable in results with my female clients.
I agree.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. Okay, you guys are really schooling me. This is very helpful. Thank you so much. I never really knew much about them, to be honest with you.
So basically, Ostrine is one of the weaker SARMs, but it's one of the first ones around. It's got the most studies behind it, and it does sort of like the most broad spectrum of things. And it is like if you gave someone Ostrine and you gave someone Anavar, they really wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah,
I don't think they could feel or see any difference.
Fascinating. Okay, David Laman asks you, Tony, can you expand on the idea of trend sensitization to IGF-1 and the use of Trenbolone with MK677 or GH and insulin? I don't know, is this something that you've talked about before?
Well, let me address the first part first because I didn't process the second one.
Sure.
I haven't seen the cell resensitization to IGF from tren. I only know this because this is something that was Coach Trevor's biggest thing he'd always talk about. Like, that's the reason he would say that people use tren for fat loss and people use tren for this and for that. And like, there's better things for a lot of those things. But what tren does that the other drugs don't do is sensitize you to IGF. So especially if you want to do a protocol like blasting and gaining size, adding a little bit of tren for that effect is really helpful. I mean, separate from that, the reason why I would use tren is definition and being able to be in a caloric deficit and not go catabolic, being an ectomorph that loses muscle easily, stuff like that, and strength and aggression, perhaps. I'm on tren right now, but I'm only on 100 milligrams per week. And I started 2.5 weeks ago, and I'm doing such a low dosage because I don't feel any side effects from this dosage. I don't feel the anger, aggression. I think it actually might help me mentally because it makes me a little bit more focused, less distracted by drama.
Are you getting benefits though?
I think so. I think the definition, the little definition coming in, like you just sort of see lines a little bit better. And that's all I'm looking for, because Joe Aesthetics is here and he's insanely shredded all the time and he's got incredible lines. And I'm just trying to see if I can, my goal is just, can I look like Joe Aesthetics with like 30% of the work by using chemistry?
That's always your goal, loopholes. Yeah, but yeah. So I agree. I think there's a lot of scientific reason to think that this may be the case because, so for example, there's an androgen paradox in hair loss. Have you ever heard of it, Tony? The paradox is this: signaling at the androgen receptor in the dermal papilla cells in the scalp for the male produces a release of TGF beta, that's transforming growth factor beta. TGF beta is very associated with fibrosis in the body, scar tissue. So what happens here is that when you get androgen signaling at the dermal papilla here, you produce scar tissue in your scalp, which actually forces the miniaturization of hair follicles. On the other hand, when you're a man and you have androgenic signaling at the hair follicles, for example, in your beard, the hair follicles there, they release IGF-1 in response to the androgen signaling. So they actually locally secrete IGF-1, the cells there, and that causes the growth of hair follicles. So we know that androgenic signaling, I know just from that it does in some parts of the body cause IGF-1 synthesis and transmission. So there must be some major interplay between the two. It makes a lot of sense.